Good evening, good afternoon, good day to those of you who are attending live and to those of you who are watching the recording. I appreciate it. My name is Dr. Josh Franco. I'm a member of the Donald A. Strauss Foundation Board of Trustees and a very proud UC Merced alum 3 times over, class of 2007/9, depending on when you actually count my degree, and then 16 and 18 with my master's and PhD. So I'm here to present about the foundation and why you should consider applying for this wonderful opportunity. So with that, I'll double check that I'm sharing my screen, and it looks like that's the case. Excellent. Okay. So the Donald A. Strauss Foundation was established in April of 1997. It was created by Dorothy Strauss, which was the wife of Donald Strauss. Donald Strauss was a public servant in the Orange County area and was involved in the kind of early years of technology, and did very well for himself and for his family and for his community. And so after he passed away, his wife Dorothy wanted to honor him with the foundation, so they established that. Then 2 years after she passed away, so the tradition has been carried on by the Strauss siblings, Gordon, Duncan, and Nancy. So since 1997 up until now, the foundation's awarded 337 projects and a total of 348 Strauss scholars across the flagship universities in California. So all the UCs and some of the private institutions like Stanford and the Claremont colleges in Southern California. So the scholarship itself, the foundation awards $15,000 scholarships to up to 15 outstanding students to pursue their projects in public service and social change. And it's important to note that up to $7,000 of that award can be applied to a student's or to a scholar's school tuition and or expenses. And then the other remaining 8 go to your project itself. So depending on the student's particular financial situation or financial aid situation, you have some flexibility there to decide how you want to allocate those resources. So a big question that people ask is, am I eligible? Are you eligible? So the first one is, do you attend one of the 22 California campuses where the scholarship is offered? For those of you at UC Merced, the answer is yes. The next question is, do you have 1 or 2 years remaining until you graduate? So if you're currently a sophomore or a junior at your institution, yes, you are eligible in this vein. If you're a freshman, you're early, which is cool. That means you can just plan ahead. If you're a senior, I'm sorry, but there are other prestigious scholarships. So talk to your undergraduate division office, either Alicia or the dean, and you guys can have a conversation about other opportunities that are available to graduating seniors for you. So next is, are you a full-time student in good academic standing? So at UC Merced, if you're taking at least 12 units per semester, you're in a full-time student. If you're taking less, you're not. So just make sure that you keep that in mind. And then the last question is, have you demonstrated a passion for making a difference in the area that you want to do your public service project in? And we'll unpack this question a little bit more. So what's in the application? What is the foundation looking for? The first is we're wanting an application summary, which you can download the form from our foundation website. We're looking for a 1-page resume, and I would say 1 page, like 1 page only. We are looking for a 1-page personal essay. Here, it doesn't have to be double spaced. Most students will use single spacing so they can get as much information about themselves as possible. Please keep it to 12 font because some of our eyes aren't as strong as they might have been when we first started doing all this. A 4-page proposal, which should include a timeline and a budget. And we do note that there are sample proposals on our foundation website, so you can check out, what and how they look. So you get some sense of, maybe how you want to approach yours. But it's always important to have a timeline section and a budget section in your proposal. Next is 2 letters of recommendation. So normally I encourage applicants to go to faculty that they've worked closely with, maybe former high school teachers that you have a connection or you maintain a connection with, staff or administrators that you've established a connection with at the university or in the or community leaders that you've been working with. So your letters of recommendation, you want them to come from people who know you and know you well and can write not just about your academic excellence or your experience working or being in the public space and serving the community, but also adding another dimension to who you are, what they see is driving you, why they see you as not only having potential for this scholarship, but the trajectory that you have going forward. So somebody who can talk a little bit more than the normal about who you are and the greatness that you are eventually will achieve in life, but how this foundation and how the scholarship will help you continue that work in the early part of your life. Note that if your project's to be done with a partner institution, you also want to include a letter of support from that organization. Now you might be asking, so can one of my letters of recommendation be a letter of support? The answer is yes, but I would also encourage you to have 2 letters of recommendation. In addition, if you're working with an outside organization, to have the letter of support. So you can have up to 3 of these documents sent to us. And unless that's told differently to you, Alicia, by Kathleen, let me know. But that's my understanding. Next, we're looking for a transcript. This can be unofficial. So you don't have to go through the whole process of requesting official transcripts. And then lastly is an acceptance agreement, which the form is available on our website to download. And this is basically you saying, I'm going to complete my project. We'll show, give bi-monthly reports, show up to the April meeting in the following year, and the like. So we have some guidelines, some special guidelines, we call them, for 2023. This is basically about COVID. We understand that COVID has impacted everyone, and we know that it's hit higher education particularly. And we know that now students who experienced this in high school are now largely at the 4-year institutions that the scholarship's available at, and we know there's some lingering effects there. So even though we're over what we see as the hump of COVID, we know that the impacts of it are continuing and will probably be with us for quite a while. So what we like to see in your proposal as like an addendum is to basically say, like, what has COVID done, and or if something like COVID or another kind of pandemic kind of happens, how would your project be able to adapt so that you can complete whatever you propose to complete? So we basically want to know first, if you have to go from like a face-to-face project to like one that's remote or online, how would you do that? And then the other one is if your project is internationally based, and say you're working overseas in a particular country, like how you would make that work if you can't travel overseas because there's either restrictions on the domestic side here with our State Department, or there's restrictions on the foreign country side that you're working in. So a conversation about that's helpful because we just want to know how you'd work through any potential challenges. So with the project proposal itself, a closer look at what we're looking for. The first one is in it explaining the social change or the service objective and your innovative means to achieve it. So in other words, I would say, like, think about it as like, what's the outcome you hope to achieve? And then what are the means or the process by which you get there? And obviously the process can be unpacked, like the team that you assemble, the organization that you're a part of, the partnership that you have, etc. And then how does that result in whatever outcome? And it doesn't have to be a single outcome. It can be multiple outcomes in achieving that goal. Next is providing a plan and a timeline which covers the academic year until April. So we're not looking for just a summer project. We're not looking just for a fall or a spring semester project. What we're looking for is what happens is you will be notified in April of a given year that you're awarded. So in this case, you would know by April of 2023 if you got the award, and your project can start. It can already have started and you're just continuing it, but we definitely do want to know what your project looked like from August of that same year to August 23 all the way till April of 2024. So that's the typical time frame we're looking at. You can obviously have more months at the front end. You can start in May and you might end the following May or June, but that core window of August to April is what we want to know very specific details about. Or say specific details varies an adjective. I don't need that in that sentence. Next is provide a plan to mobilize others in your program. So given that you're at the university, that universities are hubs of social, academic, intellectual interaction, and knowing that you're a leader in the work that you're doing is, well, how are you going to have other people, other students that you're going to work with to help continue it on going forward? So we know that no one's a one-person show, and unless you're a super all-star, which even then we kind of scratch our head saying, well, even if they're all an all-star, like we want them to be all-stars with other all-stars. So in this case, we want to know how you're going to mobilize others to help you achieve your outcome. Next, if undertaken with a partnership organization, we'd like to an outline of the mutual agreement that you've reached with them and provide a verification letter, what we call the letter of support. So here it can be as simple as, hi, I'm the CEO of whatever organization, and I'm willing to work with Strauss Scholar Name because they're awesome. Thank you sincerely. That works, like in principle, but it's nice to have a little more depth to that letter. So things like, this is who I am, this is my organization, this is the scholar, this is what we've talked about, this is what we've agreed to how we're going to work together. And even a mention from that person saying, like, if things don't work out, here's a backup person in my organization, is really helpful, because we just want to see that you basically have a strong working relationship with your partnership organization, and it's not just like a topical thing, or like, oh, I just met them and they said they're willing to do it. So I would certainly encourage you to think about working with them and drafting that letter and making it a little more in depth than you kind of would traditionally have. So in other words, like, a tweet is sufficient, but it's not, as it's necessary, but it's not sufficient, because most of the times other applicants will be detailing the nature of their relationship in probably 1.5, 2, or maybe even 3 pages. So don't be shy about the letter of support being a little more detailed than kind of you would expect. Next is explain how you will measure success. So things like number of people impacted, number of students mobilized, the results that are produced. I would just want to emphasize here that this is, I've noticed, a continuous, over time, there are certain trustees where this becomes their main criteria for deciding whether or not someone should be awarded a project. So they want to know, okay, fine, you want to improve the lives of students. How many? Who are they? Why do they need this more than other groups? Or how is this a starter group, and that you're going to help spill it over to other groups? So in other words, don't be shy about saying, this is my hoped impact, and quantifying that in meaningful ways. If you want to have additional spillovers, you can mention that. But another way of thinking about it is, like, if you're going to work with a single classroom, okay, but if you can somehow double it to a second classroom, that's awesome. If you're going to work with one school, if you can expand it to a second school, like, okay, great. In other words, we just want to see this kind of beyond maybe a small group of like 5 or 10. And what I've observed in my experience this last cycle is that we've seen some projects where it's like, that's a big impact. But then we see another one and we're like, it's like 15, 20, 30 people. And like, that's cool, especially because maybe it's a hard to reach population, or it's an underserved population, or it's just one that people don't think about. And then we've seen other projects where like they're planning on reaching 500 and 1,000, and we're just like, whoa, that's awesome too. But then the kind of the doubt or the skepticism comes into the conversation. Well, like, okay, well, how are they going to do that? So for proposals who say they're going to reach that many people, if they have a good, paragraph or two saying how it's going to happen, and we think it's reasonable, that's fine. So in other words, whatever the population number is, be sure to explain how that actually is achieved, and it can be big or small. Next is have a plan to ensure sustainability of your program. So one thing that I've been emphasizing in my presentations here and at other universities is think about working with a student club organization on campus if you're not already. Think about establishing a new one, because what it does is it gives you access to the ASUC, at least at UC Merced, the ASUCM budget to request resources for your organization during your project. And then maybe once you're done as a leader and someone else is stepping up, they can go and continue requesting resources for whatever the project is. So that's an example of sustainability of your work. Another way is if you can have it integrated into an existing nonprofit, school district, whatever your partnership organizations with. If that's your plan, then be sure in the letter of support that there's a mention of, we're going to help sustain this program after Ursula's done with her junior/senior year, because, and this is how. And they have a paragraph in there. That's really helpful too, because we're like, okay, we see that they're leading this effort. They're establishing something new and innovative with either a standalone or as with some other organization on campus or off campus. And then that off campus organization particularly is saying, like, this is how we're going to continue their work after they've graduated. Lastly is have a budget of $15,000, and note that this can include, again, up to $7,000 in scholarship for yourself. We don't judge applications based off of this. There's no trustee who's like, okay, well, they only need $2,000 for themselves and they're going to spend $13,000 on their project, so let's give it to them instead. We don't think about it that way. We look at the project on its merits. We look at both its process and its outcomes, and we don't say, well, because this student needs more, they need less, that we should or shouldn't give them an award. So in other words, be truthful with yourself and thinking like how much you need to like live and get by. And then obviously a minimum of $8,000 for your project itself. So for example, if you need to buy yourself a laptop to help you do your work, you should include that. As you can either put that saying, I'm going to use some of my scholarship for it, or you can even argue that it's going to be as a project expense. That's fine. If you're going to pay stipends for your peers who are going to be working with you, you can do that. You're going to buy pizza, you're going to buy food, you're going to pay for transport to and from a location, you're going to pay for a website or anything like that. You can put that under your project expenses. We're assuming that when you say you're going to give yourself a scholarship, it's because you need it to live and you need it to be successful in providing the basic needs that of your experience at the university so that you can actually complete the project that you set out to complete. So with that, happy to kind of pause for a second and answer any questions you may have.
I did have a question. I was wondering if we could go back to the first, this part. So if we were, sorry, the COVID one.
Oh, COVID one.
Yeah. So if, let's say like another pandemic happened, would our project have to be able to be virtual as well?
I would say yes, because the presumption now, I think, with the foundation is that we've all had this experience, and so we should be able to adapt if needed.
Okay.
Yeah. So I would have a paragraph or two having this conversation saying, okay, this is as you see my project proposal, the way we would do it in a remote space is 1, 2, 3. Or you can be very frank about it. I haven't seen it yet because this is the second or third cycle we've asked for this. I mean, if you want to be like, I can't do this, and then we'll make a note of it. I don't know how we would react. I think my reaction would be like, well, at least they're being direct and honest that it's not possible. So I think go with what works for you and what works for your project. And if you feel like it's a stretch to adapt, then you might want to just say that, because it's fine. We understand that not everything's going to work out the way we want it to. But I would also put some time into thinking, okay, how would I make this pivot if I absolutely had to? Hopefully at this point there is another pandemic, because geez Louise. God. But who knows? Other questions before I continue on?
No. That's my only question so far.
Okay. Cool. So next part is like, how do you impress us, right? Here's how. So projects focus clearly on social change, public service, social entrepreneurship. So just making a note here, it's not the intention of the foundation to fund required internships or ongoing faculty research. Now, we understand that many of our scholars are awesome people, and they're not just like excelling in the classroom, but they're excelling in their co-curricular space, their extracurricular space. They're probably leaders of clubs or organizations, or they're involved in them in some very meaningful ways. They're probably doing undergraduate research, especially at UC Merced and some of the other campuses that have that focus and that targeted experience for students. That's all well and good. And if you bring things from that research that you're doing with the faculty member, thumbs up. But your proposal shouldn't be like, pay me to do more research with the faculty. If anything, what we'd like to see is you're doing research with the faculty member. How are you spinning that off into some very practical application that's going to have a positive impact on the population that you want to serve or that you want to reach out to? Same thing with an internship. So we know some, like, for example, we get a number of applicants who are like they want to go to medical school space. And what we've learned over time is that medical students undergraduates on the medical school trajectory, they have to kind of do some kind of service project in their senior year or something that I guess makes them look better on the med school applications or something. And they'll say like, oh, this is to fund me to do my internship at a hospital. And like right away, we're like, very admirable, but that's not what we want. We want to, okay, fine, you might be interning at a hospital and you're now going to create a program that's going to help serve non-English speaking patients because you have that specialty and you want to focus on that population. Okay, right. So you're not saying fund me for my internship, fund me for, I have an internship, great. this is what I'm gonna do with my internship if you guys give me the scholarship to make it even better and to serve a particular community that I care about. Next is a demonstrated connection between the project and the applicant's passion or life experience. So this goes back to like the one-page personal statement and why it's really important. So every trustee will read everyone's personal statement like to a T, like we're super attentive to it. The reason is like that's the only way we get to know you. We don't do like face-to-face interviews or anything like that. Like that one page is you talking to us. And so what we really like to see is like, okay, who are you? Most of the times the ones I've really been gravitating towards are they kind of tell you your life journey, you know, and sometimes students say, well, I'm only 18. I'm like, yeah, you got a life journey. Like you can talk to us like when I was out of the womb kind of story to like up until that point. Like we love it because we just want to know who you are. And by showing us who you are and you then make a connection either to very direct in your personal statement or you then use your project proposal pages to say from my personal experiences you guys have read this is why I want to do what I want to do and then explain what you want to do. That's really powerful to us. And the reason this impresses us because for one reason or another we get some applications where like the student kind of tells us a little bit about themselves and like maybe some like I was born here, this is my experience and this and that, but like the heart, I guess, I don't know how else to put it, like the heart isn't there. So then they go to the proposal and you're like, that's an awesome proposal. I said, but how does it connect to who they are? So when someone says, oh, this is, I'm, you know, go down the list of all the things you can talk about. And then you're like, my proposal's on something completely unrelated to my personal life. You're kind of like, how did that happen? And it's not to say that's bad, but the point is like, we typically get applicants who make that real strong connection. And so those will always rise to that top if that's all you're looking at. So I just want to make that like super clear, like who you are as not only as a student, but who you are as in your case, Ursula, like who you are. That's what we want to know. And then we want to know how is that driving you to want to do your proposed project. Next are projects that are innovative and timely. So an idea and angle approach that hasn't been pursued widely and or addresses important current issues. So this is kind of like one of those areas where now after 25 plus years, the foundation has seen a lot of like what they think is innovative and timely. So this isn't to say like you have to come up with this like new idea, but if it's something that you think is kind of the well-traveled road, talk about how your journey on it's going to be different, or talk about how your engagement and how you're going to use that road that's been traveled by others to do things well. So for example, when I was a scholar, like this was 2005, 2006, 2007, like one of the big innovations was social media. Like Facebook was barely coming up. Like at UC Merced, like we all knew each other in 2005 on Facebook because there was only like 600 of us. So we're all on Facebook. So like we lived like, I guess, Mark Zuckerberg's dream of like the metaverse, where it's like you're both seeing each other in Valley Terrace dorms and you're like posting the pictures that you guys just had. And for me, I was an RA, so we call that evidence. But but the point is like, when I went to my April presentation, I had other colleagues who were talking about how they were using social media. And I remember the foundation, like some trustee members, like really glowing and excited, like, whoa, this and that. And so it was new to them. Now, if you talk about social media, it's like, okay, we know that. How's it going to work? So if there's like this new cutting edge thing that you're finding, bring it in. If you feel like it's something that's been used before, that's fine to talk about why it's important for you to accomplish your project goals. Next, if your project, this is the sub point. So if your project is an expansion of an existing one, talk about how yours is a major additional outreach or impact. So this is really important because we know that most of our applicants are already working in some space, some social change, public service, social entrepreneurship space. We know that and we love it. And it's just a matter of like, okay, some will say, I'm working with this organization now. I've been with them for 2 years. I started as a senior and now I'm here. Like, okay. And sometimes the applicant says, I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing. And we're like, like your personal statement, we loved it. And then we see your project proposal. It's like, what are you going to do new? And that's what we want to see. So if you're already working with an organization, awesome, possum, we love it, highlight it, but then say, this is what I'm going to do new, different within that organization, with the support of that organization, and maybe talk about how that is going to help take the organization to the next level. So be mindful of that as you're preparing your proposal. Next is we'd like to see a multiplier effect. So projects which engage other students or local participants in the public service. So an example would be like tutoring or school-based projects. They definitely need to be scalable. So we've seen now over the years that this is like a tutoring / school-based projects are pretty consistent theme, or I guess type of proposal that comes through. And okay, so it's like one class, but how are you going to scale it up to the second class or the third class or the fourth class? Sometimes students will highlight like they're going into a high needs school or high needs school district. And they'll point out things like, it's a 75% plus like free school lunch, which is an indicator of the level of poverty that the students and the families are facing in that school district. So if you're going to go into a community, like a school like that, and that's your target, you need to let us know so they're like, okay, this is an underfunded or under-resourced school, and that's why they're focusing on it. So even though it's one school district and say 1 or 2 classrooms, we get it. Now, if you're going to another school where it's like, okay, they got kind of everything, you're just adding on top, that's cool too, right? But you probably need to say, well, it's going to impact 4, 5, 6, 7 classrooms, because it's not an issue that they don't even have enough teachers per se on the campus. Their issue is like, how do we maximize the impact across as many students as possible? So we just want to see that multiplier effect given the conditions of the partners and the organizations that you're working with. Definitely, I want to emphasize the other thing that I mentioned earlier, which is having a team around you, super helpful. So when we see proposals where it's like the scholar and they're awesome, and then they start to say, I have a team of 1 or 3 or 5 people, that's okay, good, better than by yourself. And if they talk about we have a core group that's a part of an established organization, that's even better. So things that basically show you're not a lone wolf is very important, because I guess, prior to my being a trustee in earlier times, we've had some lone wolves and it just didn't work out. And that's why they emphasize this part. Next is sustainability and continuity. So I talked about the sustainability portion, right? You need to be able to do it over the academic or the school year. And we do like a discussion about future leadership. So this is where you say like it's a part of an existing club or organization, or it's a part of an existing partner organization, and or you're working on mentoring 2 or 3 freshmen or sophomores, or just like a sentence or 2 or 3 that says like, this is how I'm developing future leaders. One thing that I personally like to see, because I was in student leadership for so long, is like, we're going to have a leadership program within our program, because we want to develop the leaders who are going to carry this on going forward. So I like some mention of that personally, because I just feel like as you're thinking about your project, you're also thinking about who are the folks who are going to help carry this idea forward once you graduate from the university. Okay, and that's it. So happy to answer questions, comments, thoughts, and appreciate you guys taking time to listen.